Today we're here with Denica Riadini-Flesch, the founder and CEO of Sukkha Citta, an ethical fashion and social enterprise that works directly with Indonesian craftswomen. Let's talk about the traditional textile techniques that were at greatest risk of disappearing when you began your work, and which have you been most successful at revitalizing?
We have successfully revitalized 8 heritage techniques from batik to ikat, all the way to natural dyeing. But what I'm actually particularly most proud of is the regenerative farming aspect of our work. It's something that we don't think about that often. When we buy clothes, the last thing you would think about is the soil. And it was very fascinating for me as an economist, as I was tracing down these dots all the way to the farm, was to understand that there is already this sort of indigenous wisdom and culture around how these communities used to grow things, from food to fiber.
And how do you think about balancing these kind of centuries-old traditions with, contemporary market demands?
I believe that culture shouldn't exist in museums. It should be able to evolve with time and technology. We listen to these communities that we are serving. We co-create everything together with them. When you learn about the essence of craft, you start understanding that culture is really about this way of seeing. And because of that, I feel like culture is really the missing puzzle link when we talk about sustainable development.
Talk us through sort of like some of the challenges that you had to face.
I have been met by nothing but skepticism. I never wanted to start a company, let alone in fashion. My background is actually development economist, and I stumbled into this world as I was doing my research into poverty and what actually is the missing link when we talk about sustainable development. In rural areas, when you're a woman, it's very difficult for you to be able to find a decent job. I saw mothers working 12, 14 hours a day, earning less than $2 a day. I learned that 98% of women who make our clothes don't even earn a living wage. It was a wake-up call for me. I wanted to find a way to build a bridge, to solve this one problem that I saw in front of me. But then throughout, it became so much more. We don't realize that our colorful clothes are right now the second largest polluter of water. So I started asking the question of, what did our ancestors use to color with? I started knocking on doors on some of the older grandmas, really asking them to remember again, how did your parents, grandparents dye clothes? And slowly then we found the recipes, we started working with farmers, and we created all these colors without any chemicals, from the darkest black to the brightest pink. And I started asking, is that enough? With everything that's going on in the world right now, what if we can create clothes that can actually create positive impact, not only do less harm? And the answer to that was actually in the way our clothes are being grown. And I found the last generation of Indonesian cotton farmers. I learned from them the way their ancestors used to grow it is completely the opposite from what we would imagine conventional agriculture is. That for me was a light switch went on in my head. I started understanding that this was the missing link. This is how what we wear is connected to the climate change. And how at the same time, if we change how it's grown all the way to the farm, we can create a revolution where through what you wear, you become part of this climate solution. Not only are you providing living wages to the 12 families that made it, you're preventing litters of toxic dyes from our rivers, but at the same time, you're also regenerating soils, restoring biodiversity, while at the same time sequestering excess carbon from the atmosphere. And that was so fascinating, Regenerative farming is technology that has already existed for millions of years. And unfortunately, right now, we're systematically forcing these communities all around the world to abandon it for the sake of economic progress.
Can you share a particular artisan whose life has changed or been transformed through your program?
The woman who would come to mind immediately is Ibu Kasmini, actually our first regenerative farmer. Imagine me going through these villages and really like convincing farmers to plant cotton again. The word that kept coming back was never. It is extinct. Nobody wanted to grow it again. There was no economic ecosystem that actually rewards them from planting something like this. But after months of going back, this one woman came up to me and said, you know what? I have 1 hectare. Why don't we try? I was so happy. I was like, oh, finally, you know? So we gave her the financial freedom to do anything that she wanted. I asked her, think back to when you were a girl. What did your grandmother plant next to the cotton? And why don't we plant it again? She then planted cotton next to corn, next to mung bean, next to chili, and pumpkin. Initially, I thought that's a weird mix of plants. The cotton is actually what they call a cash crop. This is where your main livelihood is from. The chili is actually a trap crop. So essentially, by planting it next to the cotton, you attract the pests to go to the chili instead of the cotton. The mung bean is a natural nitrogen fixer. By planting it, the roots is actually absorbing nitrogen, which is what fertilizer is. The pumpkin, because it's sort of like growing underground, it keeps wheat from growing. And the corn is actually the cover crop. Because it's tall, it protects everyone. And now the IPCC is calling this one of the world's best climate solutions. It's nature-based, it's grounded in indigenous culture, it empowers smallholder farmers while at the same time increases income for these women. After 2 years, her yield and her income increased 6 times. Ibu Kasmini now leads over 100 farmers who are reclaiming this indigenous way of doing things. Not only is she keeping that alive, we're now bringing in technology to help them adapt. In her farm, we're now building Indonesia's first research and education center for regenerative farming. We're bringing soil sensors, we're bringing weather pattern analyzer, because indigenous knowledge by itself is no longer enough. And I don't feel like this is a dichotomy of either or. Actually, technology should be a tool that helps us to adapt to this changing climate. If nothing changes, by 2050, 90% of the world's soil is going to be degraded. That's really why I do what I do. I feel like my journey tracing the origin of what we wear all the way to the farm led me here to the soil.
Obviously, there are financial outcomes that are positive for these communities. How else do you measure the impact that you're having?
We track 3 different metrics. So the first is actually the lives that we get to change. We ensure that they earn living wages, and at the same time, we also track the number of fair working hours that we created through this craft in villages. So the second one is actually the environment, of course. So through our 100% use of plants, we have prevented over 4 million liters of toxic dyes from our rivers. And by changing how these materials are grown, we've now regenerated almost 50 hectares of degraded soil, bringing it back to life under the care of these women. And lastly, it's actually cultural. Through the profits that we make through our company, we reinvest it again in the community by building schools. Up to date, we've built 5 schools, and this is really a space where young women can come and learn the skills to lift herself from poverty while learning from the master artisans, these older women, who are reclaiming the broken lineage of craft in our schools. When I just started, the artisans were all above 60 years old, and today it's under 30. And it shows that this model is working. We are regenerating our planet while at the same time regenerating indigenous cultures through something beautiful that you can wear.
You're wearing something that was produced by craftswomen in Indonesia. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, what I'm wearing today is an indigo vest that came from an indigo forest. So you can imagine it takes about 3 months for the indigo plant to grow. And then this woman would pick it, put it under mountain water for 48 hours for it to ferment before being able to then use it to dye. This is when I start understanding that most people use chemical in this point. The fermented indigo, you need to wake it up. So even though you put something in, it's not going to be dyed. What we found is that indigo, like us, like sweet things. So they like sugar. We start working then with palm sugar farmers in a way that we can create this natural reduction process with completely just sugar. We call it sweet indigo. But then we start asking questions, can technology allow us to be more efficient in what we're trying to do while at the same time increasing the quality that we can get? So this piece actually is using these natural leaves and sugar, and at the same time also electromagnetic technology that helps these nature particles to actually stick better to the clothes. How do we create a different kind of beauty? Something that's not beautiful for the sake of the design, but actually in terms of also changing how it was made all the way to the farm level. And technology has allowed us to connect our consumers from all over the world with these very women who are literally planting the seed of cotton in Indonesia. Sukkha Citta was never meant to be a brand. And if you really dig deep, the values that we're upholding is so universal. Essentially, it's about three different things. First is take care of the people around you. Second, it's own up to any impact that you create on the environment. And third is to know what is your enough. So this blueprint, I feel, is completely universal. And my future vision for Sukkha Citta is that this becomes a beacon of hope that inspires other people, other social entrepreneurs in their communities to adopt this model across industries, across countries.
And tell us how the Rolex Awards has helped you in this mission.
The Rolex Award has amplified my vision for a regenerative economy. Through their support, we're now developing Indonesia's first research and education center for craft and regenerative farming. We're going to invite people from all over the world to come and learn directly from these women, to see how they can implement these ideas, these techniques in their communities. And that's really important because now more than ever, we need action everywhere, everyone at the same time. It's no longer about, oh, this is not my responsibility, it's the government's responsibility, or it's the company's responsibility. If you look at the forest, there are so many different crops. There's the big trees, you have the small trees, you have the bush, and you have like little pollinators like butterflies and bees. And you start understanding that everyone has a function. Everyone has a role to play in building the world that we want to pass on to the next generation. And the Rolex Award has allowed me to do exactly that.
Well, you're having a significant impact on people's lives. You're having a significant impact on the planet. So Denica, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Greg.